You were never meant to stay where you were born. There's a reason the fire inside you has been restless, Scorpio. A reason why you've been sitting in a room full of people you share blood with, and yet feeling like a ghost in your own life. It's not that you've outgrown them in arrogance, it's that your soul is evolving. And sometimes evolution doesn't feel like expansion at first, it feels like exile. What if I told you that your disconnection from your family isn't a curse, but a sacred calling? What if the ache you feel when you hear your name from their mouths, the suffocation you sense in rooms where you were raised, what if all of that is on purpose? You, Scorpio, were never designed to be domesticated. You were never meant to live your entire life as the protector of generational patterns that secretly destroyed you. No, you were born into your bloodline to eventually break from it, not because you're ungrateful. Not because you don't love them, but because something far deeper is asking to be born from you. And that's something, your truth, your power, your voice. It cannot breathe in spaces that were built to contain you. You see, Scorpio doesn't just inherit trauma, Scorpio alchemizes it. And in this lifetime, your soul has signed a contract not to stay where it's comfortable, but to rise, even if that means rising alone. The conversations are getting shorter, the connection is fading, the guilt is getting louder, and yet the distance is beginning to feel like freedom. This isn't rebellion, it's a divine relocation, a spiritual untethering. A sacred pause between what raised you and what will awaken you. So if you're watching this now, it's not a coincidence. It's your soul whispering, you were never meant to stay, you were meant to resurrect. In this video, we're going to walk together through the truth most Scorpios are afraid to say out loud. That sometimes the deepest healing begins the moment you leave your own bloodline behind. But don't worry, this isn't a goodbye. It's the beginning of a return, not to them, but to yourself. Let's begin part 1, the sacred separation. Why Scorpio cannot grow where they were planted. Scorpio, what if I told you that the disconnection you feel from your family is a divine signal, not a dysfunction? That the emotional distance, the growing silence, the fatigue of pretending to belong, it isn't a failure of love. It's the whisper of your evolution. You see, not all families are homes, some are launch pads, some are karma. And some are temples built only for your early survival, not your eternal truth. Scorpio, yours is a soul of intensity. You don't just live through things, you die through them. You don't just experience change, you become the storm. And when that's the soul blueprint you carry, the environment you were born into will almost always be too small to contain what you are becoming. Let me tell you something sacred. Where you were planted is not where you were meant to bloom. You were placed in your family not to become like them, but to outgrow what broke them. And that's no easy task, because Scorpio doesn't just inherit a last name. Scorpio inherits emotional contracts, unspoken roles. Ancestral guilt, the responsibility to protect, even when no one protects you. And over time, you may have mistaken that responsibility for identity. You may have confused endurance with belonging. But now something inside you is unraveling. The smiles feel forced, the traditions feel hollow, and the version of you that your family knows begins to feel like a mask that's cracking. It's not disrespect, it's not rebellion. It's your spirit stretching against the cage of old expectation. You were born into that system for a reason, but you were never meant to stay in it. Scorpio, transformation doesn't happen where it's comfortable, it happens in the cracks. In the break, in the sacred, shattering realization that the love you've always tried to preserve is costing you your life force. And this is where it begins. That aching awareness that your growth will not be celebrated in the house you were raised in. That your voice, when it finally speaks its truth, will sound like rebellion to those who only know your silence. But you weren't created to perform. You were created to resurrect. The Scorpio journey has always been about sacred death. Not a physical ending, but a symbolic one. A soul choosing to end the cycle of inherited survival and step into authentic power. And that kind of becoming requires space. It requires stillness. It requires you to step outside of the emotional noise of the family story. So you can hear the quiet roar of your own becoming. You are not abandoning them, you are answering a higher call. Because if you stay too long in rooms that ask you to shrink, you will start to believe that your depth is a problem, that your dreams are selfish, that your emotional honesty is too much. But Scorpio, you were never too much. You were simply planted in a place that feared what you could become. And now, you're starting to bloom anyway. Let them misunderstand you. Let the distance come. Let the silence stretch if it must. Because beyond that silence, beyond that temporary ache, lies the sacred soil of your real life, where your voice is not questioned, your soul is not shamed, and your love doesn't require you to die inside to keep it alive. This is the sacred separation, and it's not the end of your story. It's the first chapter of your liberation. Life lesson, what you can take with you. When your soul begins to outgrow the walls that raised you, it's not betrayal, it's becoming. And the most radical act of love you can offer yourself is to stop shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. Part 2, the first Scorpio Decan, Oct 23, Nov 1. The emotional guardian who forgot their own needs. Scorpio, if your birthday falls between October 23rd and November 1st, you were born under the shadow of sacrifice. Not the loud, heroic kind, but the invisible kind, the kind that shows up when a child becomes the emotional anchor for an entire household. The kind that absorbs the storm so others can pretend the sky is still blue. You were the stabilizer, the watcher, the one who felt tension before words were spoken. You knew the rhythm of the house by the silence between footsteps. You read moods like weather patterns. And you made it your mission to keep the roof from caving in, even if it meant holding your breath until it passed. You didn't become this way because someone asked you to. You became this way because your soul couldn't look away from the pain of others. You were built to sense, to protect, to endure, but somewhere along the way you stopped sensing yourself. And Scorpio, here's the truth. You are not weak for feeling drained. You are not broken for needing space. You are simply exhausted from being everyone's anchor while no one anchored you. No one saw how much you carried, how you tucked your needs behind your back so others could feel safe, how you nodded quietly during chaos, how you stayed calm so no one else had to fall apart. You were praised for being so strong. But strength became a mask, one you didn't know how to take off, because who would hold the pieces if you let go? Scorpio, it's time to finally ask the question no one ever gave you permission to ask. What about me? What about the child inside you who never got to cry because they were too busy being the calm one? What about your own pain, the one you shelved so others didn't feel uncomfortable? What about the dreams you didn't speak aloud because they didn't fit the script of your family's comfort zone? The separation you're feeling now, this emotional distance that's been growing louder, is not betrayal. It's your soul's quiet cry for restoration. Because here's the truth that may crack you open. Your worth is not measured by how much you can carry for others. Your value is not in how invisible you can become to avoid conflict. Your role was never supposed to be permanent. You were not born to be the emotional shield. You were born to become the architect of your own freedom. And freedom begins the moment you stop rescuing people from storms they created and start tending to the ones inside you. Yes, Scorpio, this may mean disappointing people who relied on your silence. This may mean walking away from roles that made others feel safe but left you in pieces. But you were never meant to be the home. You were meant to build one for yourself. You do not have to explain why you're tired anymore. You do not need to justify your retreat, your boundaries, your absence. You are allowed to step back, to rest, to heal. And in doing so, you give others the sacred opportunity to meet their own storms, to face what you can no longer carry for them. Let this be your truth. You are not selfish, you are sacred, and your healing matters just as much as theirs. Life lesson, what you can take with you. Being strong for others is noble, but building a life where you can be soft with yourself, that's divine. Scorpio, you are not their shelter anymore. You are your own sanctuary now. Part 3, the second Scorpio decan, Nov 2, Nov 12. The one who was never fully seen. Scorpio, if your birthday falls between November 2nd and November 12th, your path has likely been shaped by a haunting ache. Not loud, not catastrophic, but persistent. A feeling that no matter how present you were, no one ever truly saw you. You could be sitting at the table with your family, speaking from the soul, and still feel like you're whispering into an empty canyon. Your ideas were often too deep, your instincts too sharp, your curiosity too bold, and rather than being celebrated, you were gently or not so gently dismissed. They said you were too sensitive, too serious, too intense. So you learned to dim the fire, not because you were ashamed of it, but because it scorched the comfort zone of those around you. And over time, that fire became embers. You began to shrink yourself to fit their idea of acceptable. You traded your knowing for their approval, your clarity for their comfort. But here's the sacred truth: you were never too much. You were just surrounded by people who preferred shadows over light. Your emotional intelligence, it wasn't dangerous. It was divine, but people who fear their own reflection will always flinch when they see it in someone else's eyes. And Scorpio, that's what you are. A mirror, one that reflects not just surface behavior, but buried motives, unspoken truths, and unresolved wounds. And in families that rely on illusion to maintain control, a mirror becomes a threat, so they looked away. They minimized your feelings, they called your questions disrespectful, and eventually you stopped asking. You learned to play small, not because you believed in your smallness, but because it cost too much to be real. But now the silence that once protected you has become the very prison you must break. Because Scorpio, your voice is not meant to be background noise. Your knowing is not meant to be swallowed. Your fire is not meant to be domesticated. You are not here to make others comfortable. You are here to bring truth to the surface, no matter how uncomfortable it makes them. The universe is creating new rooms for you now. Rooms that will not only tolerate your depths, but drink from it. You will meet people who don't flinch when you speak your truth. People who don't ask you to water yourself down to stay. People who recognize your gaze as familiar, because they too have walked through the fire. But first, you must stop waiting for your family to understand what they were never willing to look at. You must stop shrinking in the hopes that one day they'll see you and say, "Yes, that's who you are. We missed it before, but we see it now." They may never say that, and that's okay, because the recognition you crave is not behind you, it's ahead. And it starts with you. It starts with looking in your own mirror and saying, "I see you, I believe you, you are never too much." You don't need permission to rise, Scorpio. You only need truth and the courage to speak it, even if your voice shakes. Life lesson, what you can take with you. When you are no longer willing to be unseen, your real life begins. Scorpio, don't wait for others to recognize your brilliance. Go where your light doesn't have to explain itself. Part 4, the third Scorpio decan, Nov 13, Nov 21. The one who lost themselves in everyone else. Scorpio, if you were born between November 13th and November 21st, then you understand something about invisibility that most never will. Not the kind of invisibility that comes from being ignored, but the kind that comes from being consumed. You weren't just overlooked, you were absorbed, projected upon, expected to become what others couldn't be for themselves. Your individuality was never rejected, it was never even seen, because from an early age you were made into an extension, a role, a placeholder, a mask someone else needed you to wear so they didn't have to face their own void. You were the dream someone else deferred, the identity someone else designed, and little by little, without even noticing, you disappeared inside the expectations of others. You learned to shapeshift, to read the emotional needs of the room before you even entered it, to become what others craved at the expense of what your own soul was crying out for. And Scorpio, this is the cruel paradox. Everyone felt close to you because they saw their reflection in you, but no one truly knew you because you weren't allowed to be yourself. You were praised for being easy, adaptable, good. But what they really meant was, you don't disrupt the image we have of ourselves. But here's the soul truth, Scorpio. You were not born to be a mirror, you were born to be a flame. And a flame cannot survive if it's always dimmed to keep others warm. That ache inside you, the one that's been growing louder lately. It's not confusion, it's awakening. It's the call to unfuse, to unblend, to unmask, because underneath the layers of approval-seeking and self-erasure, there's a voice that's been waiting, one that doesn't echo others, one that speaks in the thunderous dialect of truth. This separation you're feeling from your family isn't a rupture, it's a rescue. The divine is not punishing you, it is returning you to yourself. You are not selfish for walking away from roles you never agreed to. You are not cruel for peeling off the masks that once made others feel safe. You are not disloyal for asking, who am I when I'm not performing? You are becoming, and becoming always looks like betrayal to those who only knew you as a projection. But Scorpio, let them call it what they want. Your truth is too precious to keep burying for the sake of peace. Your soul did not come here to impersonate safety. It came to ignite transformation. You no longer have to be what others need you to be. You're allowed to disappoint those who only loved you when you disappeared. And in the space where your old identity begins to fall away, something miraculous happens. You begin to recognize your own reflection again. Not the one built by others, but the one forged in fire, shaped by storms, and reborn in sovereignty. Life lesson, what you can take with you. You are not here to play a part in someone else's play. You are here to write your own script. Scorpio, the moment you stop becoming who others need, you begin becoming who your soul remembers. Part 5, the psychological roles Scorpio was forced to play. The mask that no longer fits. Scorpio, have you ever stopped to ask, who would I be if I weren't performing emotional CPR for everyone around me? What would remain if I stopped being what others needed and started being what I truly am? For many of you, especially those raised in emotionally volatile or emotionally numb families, you didn't develop an identity based on who you were. You developed one based on who others needed you to be, and over time that identity became a role, a mask, a survival suit. Some of you became the protector, always reading the room, anticipating conflict, diffusing tension before it exploded. You were praised for your composure, but underneath it, your nervous system never rested. Others became the outsider, the misunderstood one, the quiet observer who kept to themselves because Speaking your truth was either ignored, mocked, or twisted. So you learned it was safer to stay silent, even when you were screaming inside. Some of you became the fixer, taking on everyone's emotions like puzzle pieces you were meant to solve. Their chaos became your responsibility. And your needs, well, they became optional. And some of you, Scorpio, became the chameleon, shape-shifting, adapting, becoming whoever you needed to be just to maintain peace. You were the peacekeeper, but it came at the cost of your own authenticity. These roles may have kept you safe, they may have earned you praise, access, even affection, but they were never you. They were walls you built to survive the emotional architecture of a home. That didn't know how to hold your truth, but now, those walls are crumbling not to destroy you, but to set you free. Scorpio, you're not broken because you're tired of being the strong one. You're not weak because you no longer want to be the peacekeeper. You're not selfish for wanting more than the emotional crumbs of survival. You're simply waking up. Waking up to the knowing that roles are prisons when they become permanent. That even love, if it demands a mask, is not love, it's emotional choreography. The version of you that your family knew. It was often a mask built to make everyone else comfortable. But the version of you that is emerging now, it's the one they don't recognize. That's the real you, the one that has been watching from within, waiting, burning, refusing to be erased any longer. And yes, there will be grief. Letting go of these roles means letting go of the identity that once helped you survive. But grief, in this sacred context, is not weakness. It is release. You are grieving a version of yourself that kept you safe in a place you no longer belong. And Scorpio, you were never meant to belong to a role. You were meant to belong to your truth. Let the masks fall. Let the roles dissolve. Let the false versions of yourself die. So that the real you, the deep, divine, unapologetic you can finally rise. Life lesson, what you can take with you. You are not the role you played to survive. You are the soul that endured long enough to remember itself. Scorpio, it's time to take the mask off. Your truth doesn't need permission to breathe anymore. Part 6, Soul Family versus Blood Family. Scorpio's real home is energetic, not genetic. Scorpio, you've spent a lifetime trying to feel at home in a house built from expectation. A house of shared DNA. A house of duty, tradition, silence, and unspoken pain. But what if I told you? Home isn't where you were born, it's where your soul is understood without translation. You see, blood may connect you by body, but energy connects you by truth, and truth has always been your compass, even when it pointed away from those who raised you. Let's be honest. You've tried, haven't you? Tried to bridge the gap, tried to soften your truth, tried to smile when your soul was aching, tried to fit into rooms where your questions were too big, your gaze too sharp, your intuition too strained. But no matter how much you compromised, you never truly belonged. And that's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you were never meant to stay hidden inside a family system that fears light. Because Scorpio, your light is disruptive. It dissolves illusions. It digs too deep. It knows what others avoid. And in families that rely on masks to survive, you, truth incarnate, become a threat, but your soul, it remembers something ancient. That your real family isn't bound by blood. Your real family is soul-aligned. These are the ones you don't need to explain yourself to. The ones who read your silence like scripture. The ones who don't flinch when you speak in fire. It's the ones who hear your rage and don't call it drama. They call it power finally given permission to breathe. Scorpio, your soul family is out there, and they are not confused by your depth, they are drawn to it. Because they've walked through their own darkness too, and they recognize the sacred in you. Not because of your last name, But because of your energetic truth, this is what real family feels like. It doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't trade your silence for peace. It doesn't weaponize your sensitivity. It doesn't punish you for becoming someone they no longer control. Real family doesn't chain you to your past. They walk beside you into your future. And yes, it may take time to find them. There may be a wilderness before the warmth, a silence before the symphony, but they're out there, already making space in their lives for someone just like you, someone who's honest, someone who's unapologetically deep, someone who's felt everything and still chooses to love bigger. So let go of the guilt. Let go of the idea that walking away from your bloodline is abandonment. It's not, it's an alignment. It's your spirit saying, this house was part of my beginning but not my becoming. Because when you finally mate your soul family, you'll realize something breathtaking. You weren't too much, you were just in the wrong room. Life lesson, what you can take with you. Family isn't who you share your genetics with, it's who holds your truth in their hands and never flinches. Scorpio, your real tribe isn't looking for someone polite, they're looking for someone real. And that is you. Part 7, guilt is not love. The emotional trap Scorpio must break free from. Scorpio, there's a voice inside you that whispers every time you choose your peace over performance. Every time you say no. Every time you draw a boundary. Every time you walk away from a role you never agreed to, it whispers, you're abandoning them. You're selfish. You're turning your back on love. But that voice, Scorpio, that's not your intuition. That's conditioning. You were trained to confuse guilt with love, trained to believe that love means sacrificing your truth, that loyalty means silence, that closeness means carrying what's breaking you just to keep the illusion of family alive. Let me be clear, guilt is not love. It's the echo of manipulation, cultural scripting, generational trauma, and it thrives when you mistake emotional debt for connection. You do not owe your family your voice in exchange for approval. You do not owe them your shrinking just because they gave you food and a roof. You do not owe them a lifetime of emotional obedience because they share your blood. What you owe is yourself, your healing, your freedom, your full expression. The version of you that's been locked behind guilt bars for years deserves to breathe. Scorpio, guilt is sticky. It wears the mask of love so well, you start believing that discomfort means you're doing something wrong. But sometimes, discomfort is growth. Sometimes, peace feels foreign because you've lived in emotional chaos for so long. Sometimes, guilt is simply the ghost of a role dying. And your soul is the one burying it. Here's the truth, you're allowed to want more than survival. You're allowed to walk away from what breaks your spirit. You're allowed to want connection that doesn't ask you to lie to yourself. You're allowed to want love that feels like liberation, not imprisonment. And when you feel that guilt creeping in, breathe and remind yourself, I am not betraying them. I am returning to myself. Because love, real love, doesn't require a mask. It doesn't punish you for growing. It doesn't chain you to the past. And if they cannot love you without your obedience, then what they loved was never you. It was the performance, the compliance, the version of you that made them feel safe. But Scorpio, you are not here to make others comfortable. You are here to make your soul whole. So let the guilt melt. Let the emotional contract expire. Let the stories of not enough and too much burn in the fire of your becoming. You are not walking away from love. You are walking toward it finally. Life lesson, what you can take with you. Guilt says, you're wrong for choosing yourself. But love says, thank you for coming home. Scorpio, real love never punishes truth, it celebrates it. Don't stay loyal to your pain, be loyal to your soul. Part 8, breaking the bloodline spell. Scorpio and the power to heal the ancestral wound. Scorpio, what if I told you You weren't just healing for yourself, that this separation, this discomfort, this inner breaking is not just personal, it's ancestral. You see, the pain you carry did not begin with you, it echoes through the voices of your mother who couldn't speak her truth, through the silence of your father who swallowed his emotions, through the lineage of women who were told to serve, not shine, through the men who learned that control was safer than vulnerability. And here you are, the one who feels it all, the one who can't stay asleep inside the old story, the one who asks questions no one dares to speak out loud. That's not coincidence, that's assignment. You, Scorpio, are the sole chosen breaker of the cycle, the one who was born with a fire so ancient it could burn through generations of silence. And yes, it hurts because healing doesn't feel like light at first. It feels like separation. It feels like grief. It feels like exile. But what you're experiencing is not rejection, it's a bloodline recalibration. Because someone had to be the first to say, "This ends with me." Someone had to feel what everyone else numbed. Someone had to question what everyone else obeyed. Someone had to break the loyalty to pain disguised as tradition. And that someone is you. Scorpio, don't underestimate the sacredness of your discomfort. The tears you cry today are freedom songs for ancestors who died with theirs buried. Every truth you speak now plants the seed for future generations to grow in a soil not soaked with shame, but with strength. You are the turning point, the alchemist, the one who walks through emotional fire, not to destroy your family's legacy, but to purify it. Let go of the fear that healing means dishonoring them. It doesn't. You're not betraying your ancestors by changing. You're honoring them by doing what they couldn't, by becoming what they weren't allowed to be, by choosing love that liberates over love that controls, by walking away from survival and into sovereignty. This is not abandonment, it's alchemy, it's reclamation, it's the sacred act of saying, "I was born from your story, but I will not repeat your pain." Scorpio, your courage is a doorway, and behind it stands the child you once were, the elders who came before you, and the souls who will one day call you ancestor. They're watching, and silently they're thanking you. Life lesson, what you can take with you. Healing yourself is not selfish, it's sacred. Scorpio, you are the fire your ancestors prayed for. You are not destroying the bloodline, you are waking it up. Part 9, the return to self. Scorpio's next chapter can't be built on old blueprints. Scorpio, now that you've walked away from the house of silence, from the roles that numbed you, from the emotional architecture built by those who could not see your truth, the question now becomes, what do you build in their place? Because here's what no one tells you about healing. Once the mask comes off, the mirror appears. And in that mirror, you will face something more terrifying than guilt, more painful than distance. Your own reflection. Not the version shaped by obligation, not the role crafted in childhood, but the soul beneath it all. And that soul is ancient, Scorpio. It remembers. It remembers who you were before you were told who to be. It remembers the fire that once roared in your chest before it was trained to whisper. It remembers the vision, the voice, the essence, before the world put its fingerprints all over your identity. This is the return. But not a return to people or places or patterns. This is a return to self. You're no longer the protector. You're the visionary. You're no longer the outsider. You're the architect. You're no longer the one trying to survive in someone else's house. You're building your own temple now, and that temple will not be constructed from guilt. It will not be decorated with self-sacrifice. It will not echo with the voices of those who only loved the compliant version of you. Scorpio, it's time to choose new materials, honesty instead of harmony, intuition instead of imitation, courage instead of comfort. You're no longer seeking permission. You're setting direction. You're no longer a product of your past. You're the author of your future. And yes, it may feel disorienting, because when you've spent years building a self from expectations, your true self might feel unfamiliar at first. But don't mistake unfamiliar for unworthy. That quiet voice inside you, that's your real voice. And it's been waiting for you all along. The next chapter of your life can't be written in the language of the past. It must be written in your soul's native tongue. Truth, you don't need to prove you're worthy. You are. You don't need to go back and explain. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your transformation. You are not who they remember. Because who you are becoming is someone they never took the time to truly meet. Let them hold the memory. You hold the mirror, because when you look into it now, you'll see not a wounded child, not a role player, not a shadow. You'll see the phoenix, the one who walked through fire, watched everything familiar collapse, and rose anyway. Life lesson, what you can take with you. You cannot build your future on the blueprints of your survival. Scorpio, your next chapter doesn't require you to be who you were. It requires you to be who you truly are. And that is more than enough. Part 10, the conclusion. The sacred exit, the soul rebirth, and Scorpio's final lesson on love and truth. Scorpio, if you've made it here, still breathing, still listening, still open, then something inside you already knows. This was never just about family. It was about freedom. It was about truth. It was about becoming who you were always meant to be. Even if no one else ever gave you permission, you didn't leave out of anger, you left out of reverence. Because your soul could no longer bear the weight of being half alive. And let's be honest, there will be moments when the past still calls you back, when guilt returns in waves, when memories sweeten over time and make you question your decision. That's normal, it's human, but it doesn't mean you were wrong. Because love, real love, doesn't require a mask, and truth doesn't negotiate with manipulation. And healing doesn't apologize for growing beyond the story that hurt you. You are not betraying your family by becoming whole. You are breaking the curse of inherited self-denial. You are dissolving the spell of silence. You are proving that boundaries do mean abandonment. They mean maturity. That distance doesn't mean disconnection. It means redirection. Scorpio, you were never here to carry everyone else's pain until you drowned. You were here to rise, to lead, to awaken others by example. By daring to love yourself so loudly that those still hiding begin to remember their own fire. You are not too much. You are not too far gone. You are not broken beyond repair. You are becoming. And the path of becoming will always look like rebellion to those still asleep. But walk it anyway, with fire in your spine and softness in your chest. With silence when needed and thunder when required. With grief, yes, but with grace. With truth not to wound but to liberate. And with love, pure, undiluted, unconditioned love, first for yourself and then for those who can meet you there. Scorpio, your soul did not come here to conform, it came here to transform. And now you're ready. Final life lesson, what you can take with you. You are not walking away from love, you are walking toward it, toward truth. Toward freedom, toward the you that was always waiting beneath the noise. Scorpio, this is your sacred exit and your soul's glorious return. Final reflection. This was never just about family. It was about freedom. Scorpio, take a moment, breathe. What you've just walked through in this message wasn't just a story about separation. It was the beginning of your spiritual sovereignty. You are not defined by where you came from. You are not doomed to repeat the roles that were handed to you. And you are not alone in this sacred unraveling. You are remembering who you are, what you carry, why you were born into fire. and how to rise from its ashes as something brighter, bolder, truer. This journey may feel isolating at times, but I promise you it is not emptiness you're stepping into, it is expansion. It is where your truth can finally breathe, where your soul family is already waiting, where your own voice, no longer edited by guilt, can become the healing song you were born to sing. If this message spoke to something buried in you, if it felt like it was written for the part of you that no one else sees, then this is your path. Subscribe to the path to Buddhist wisdom and walk with us. Together we explore the sacred truth of Scorpio, the transformation of the soul, and the wisdom that comes only when you dare to let go of what no longer serves your becoming. You don't need permission to rise, you just need to say yes to yourself, so say it, and I'll see you in the next chapter.